Title: Firefighter Denied Entry. The World Watched. Part 1: Smoke and Silence. The sirens wailed like screams in the wind. Firefighter Darius Coleman gripped the steering wheel of Engine 74, his eyes locked on the thick gray smoke billowing into the sky ahead. The GPS marked the location: Rose Hill Estates, one of the wealthiest, most gated communities in Greenville County. 2 kids trapped inside, the dispatcher had said. Single-family home, 2nd floor. Darius's jaw tightened. He'd been here before. Not just to this neighborhood, but to this moment. Racing toward danger, chasing time, fighting fire and something far colder. The wrought iron gates of Rose Hill Estates shimmered in the summer heat as the truck approached. A private security guard stepped out from a small booth, arms crossed. Darius leaned out the window. "Greenville Fire Department. We have a confirmed rescue situation." The guard squinted. "No one called me about this." "You don't need to be called. The dispatch sent us. There's a house on fire." Still, the guard hesitated. Behind them, smoke poured higher. Darius's partner, Tom Reyes, shouted, "You're wasting time. Open the damn gate." But the guard didn't move. His eyes weren't on the flames. They were on Darius, black, covered in soot, a uniform stained with sweat and smoke. "You need to wait for clearance," the guard said, voice flat. Darius stared at him. People are trapped. By the time the second engine arrived, commanded by a white lieutenant, the gates were open. 8 minutes lost. Inside, the fire had grown out of control. The children were rescued, but both suffered second-degree burns. One had to be airlifted. That night, Darius sat alone in the locker room, staring at the floor. Reyes walked in slowly, still smelling of smoke and melted plastic. "They're gonna be okay," he said. Darius didn't look up. They almost weren't. The next morning, someone sent him a video, shot from a nearby driveway. The guard, blocking the truck, Darius yelling, smoke rising in the background, a child's scream echoing faintly. The video was raw, undeniable. It went viral within hours. By noon, the city was on fire, but this time, not from smoke. Twitter exploded. "Black firefighter blocked from saving white children? Rose Hill Estates, you racist estates. He deserved to go through that gate." By 3 p.m., the mayor had issued a statement. By 6 p.m., national outlets picked it up. CNN, NBC, BuzzFeed, local news. Firefighter blocked by private security in gated community tragedy. And Darius? He was silent. Not because he didn't have something to say, but because he didn't know if anyone really listened before the camera showed up. That night, his phone rang. It was his battalion chief. "Coleman, you okay?" "No." Pause. "I want you to know, we're standing with you, but this is going to get ugly." Darius nodded slowly. It already did. The next day, a press conference was called. The fire chief stood before the podium, Darius behind him. So was Reyes, and the mother of the rescued children. The chief cleared his throat. "We want to make one thing very clear. Firefighter Coleman followed every protocol. He was doing his job. He should have been allowed to do his job." A reporter asked, "Was race a factor?" Darius stepped forward. He hadn't planned to speak, but he was done being silent. "I don't know what was in that man's heart," he said, "but I know what was in his eyes, and I know what it feels like to be told, even in uniform, even when lives are at stake, that I don't belong." The crowd fell silent. Then came the first clap, then many. By nightfall, the mayor had launched an official inquiry into private security practices in the city. The Rose Hill Guard was suspended. The security company issued a public apology, but the community wasn't satisfied. Neither was Darius. 2 days later, the security company's internal memo leaked. "In future incidents involving certain demographics, notify both HOA and law enforcement before granting emergency access unless ordered by supervisor." The backlash exploded. The implication was clear. They had policies based on race. That was the breaking point. Under public pressure, the Greenville Fire Department Union held a vote of no confidence. Not in Darius, but in the city's contract with the security firm. And then something rare happened. The mayor listened. The contract was canceled, and the guard who blocked Darius officially fired. But the story wasn't over, because Rose Hill HOA filed a complaint. against Darius, claiming his tone was aggressive, that his language caused fear, that he should have waited for proper authorization. Darius sat in the HR office flanked by Camille Davis, a civil rights attorney who took the case pro bono. "You have no legal standing," she said coolly, "and no moral ground." The complaint was dropped within 24 hours, and still, the weight remained. Darius stood in front of his locker, the gear that had once meant only duty now layered in something else. History, pain, visibility. He'd never wanted to be a symbol, just a firefighter, but maybe that was the point. 2 weeks later, the city council passed the Darius Coleman Access Law, making it illegal for any private security in the city to block emergency services under any condition. And then came the call from a national union, asking Darius to speak, not just about what happened, but about how it keeps happening. He said yes, not because he wanted attention, but because silence was too expensive. Part 2, Smoke After the Fire. The radio segment aired at 7:45 a.m., just as parents were dropping their kids off at school and commuters sat in traffic with coffee in hand. A popular local conservative host spat out his words like venom. "So now we're canceling security guards for doing their job? Let me get this straight. A guy doesn't open a gate because he didn't get confirmation, and suddenly he's racist? Come on, folks. Let's not pretend like every uniform is immune from scrutiny, even when it's a fireman's." Darius heard it from the truck radio on his first day back on shift. He didn't react, but Reyes did. He slammed the off button. "Trash," he muttered. "Straight up trash." Darius kept his eyes on the road. Let them talk. They weren't the ones watching smoke crawl into the sky while kids screamed behind steel. By lunch, a different kind of call came in. Internal memo from the Deputy Fire Commissioner's office. All public appearances, interviews, or press-related activity must be approved through official department channels. Reyes looked at the email, then looked at Darius. "Are you even surprised?" Darius shook his head. "Not even a little." Over the next 2 weeks, Darius received 24 interview requests. CNN, The Today Show, Trevor Noah. He declined most, except for one, local Channel 9. The same news crew that covered the original video. He agreed on one condition. "We don't talk about what happened to me. We talk about how often this happens to people without cameras rolling." The interview aired during prime time and went deeper than anyone expected. Darius sat in front of a simple black backdrop dressed in his station polo. No gear, no helmet, just words. "When we arrive on scene, seconds matter. We're trained to push past fear, smoke, chaos. But what we're not trained for is being told we don't belong. Not by civilians. And sure as hell not when lives are on the line." He paused. "That gate didn't just delay us. It told me, loud and clear, that my uniform didn't erase my skin." The reporter asked, "Do you think it would have gone differently if your captain was white?" Darius replied softly but surely, "I don't think. I know." The backlash came hard. Online trolls flooded his inbox. "Race baiter. Professional victim. Another angry black man in uniform." A fake account impersonated him on Facebook, posting inflammatory rants that he never wrote. The union's social media page deleted every positive mention of his name to avoid controversy. And yet, the video reached 12 million views, and counting. Meanwhile, at the firehouse, the air changed. Some of the older guys stopped making eye contact. Some didn't even hide it. A lieutenant named Wilkins openly said during lunch, "I don't like firefighters who act like activists." Reyes stood up. "Then maybe you don't like firefighters who tell the truth." Wilkins left the room, but the silence he left behind stayed. Battalion Chief Emery called Darius into his office the next morning. He was a black man in his 50s, with 30 years on the job and eyes that had seen everything. He poured coffee, didn't smile. "You good?" he asked. "I'm tired." "I know," Emery replied. "I've walked this line too." Darius waited. "But I need you to know," Emery continued, "this department is bigger than you, bigger than all of us." Darius nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time we made it better than us too." Outside the station, a woman stood holding a cardboard sign. "Thank you, Darius. You saved my niece." He walked over. She introduced herself as Tyra Wren, Her niece was the girl who'd been burned in the Rose Hill fire. She talks about you, Tyra said. Says you're the bravest person she ever saw. Darius smiled faintly. She's braver. Tyra handed him an envelope. Inside, a letter written in crayon. Dear Mr. Darius, thank you for saving me. I was so scared, but then I saw you, and I knew it would be okay. Love, Alina. He didn't cry, but his hands shook. That night, the fire chief sent a quiet message. City Hall wants you to consider stepping away from frontline duty for optics. Darius stared at the screen, then typed back, no. Instead, he filed a proposal, Equity in Emergency Response, a training program aimed at private security, dispatch coordination, and implicit bias in emergency protocol. It was thorough, data-driven, and ahead of its time. The city council ignored it, but the press didn't. The proposal was leaked. BuzzFeed called it the future of inclusive emergency response. Time magazine ran a cover story, the firefighter who said no to the gate and yes to reform. And then the mayor called, for the first time. She invited Darius to City Hall. Behind closed doors, she offered him a position, Deputy Director of Emergency Operations, Community Trust Division, a brand new title, a brand new department, real funding, real reach, and a desk. Far from the fire. He had one question. Can I still fight fires? The mayor blinked. That's not typical for a director. Darius smiled. Neither is being told you're not allowed to save a life because you're black. Part 3, Fire or Office. The desk was too clean. That was Darius's first thought as he stepped into the newly created Community Trust Division office on the 4th floor of City Hall. White walls, chrome shelves, framed photos of the city skyline, a view of the courthouse across the street. The receptionist greeted him with a tight smile. Director Coleman, welcome. He forced a polite nod. It still felt strange to be called anything other than firefighter. His first meeting was with the mayor's chief of staff, a woman named Janine Clark. Professional, sharp, always 5 steps ahead. Here's the plan, she said, spreading charts across the table. You'll oversee outreach, policy alignment, diversity recruitment for first responders, and conflict resolution programs between emergency services and private security firms. We'll give you 3 interns and a small team. Darius blinked. 3 interns? Janine smiled. This is politics, Mr. Coleman, not a fire engine. For the next 2 weeks, Darius barely saw the sun. Meetings, reports, data briefs. He sat in rooms with polished people who talked about marginalized communities like they were spreadsheets. He met with security company execs who smiled through gritted teeth and said things like, "We understand the optics of what happened." He listened. He took notes. But inside, the fire never left. One evening, after another long meeting about racial tension management protocols, Darius drove back to Station 74. He walked in, just like old times. Reyes was on the couch watching the news. When he saw Darius, he grinned. "Look who traded the hose for a tie." Darius laughed. "I miss the smoke." "You miss nearly getting killed." "I miss knowing I saved somebody." Reyes tossed him a cold soda. "You're saving more people now than you ever did running into buildings." Darius stared at the can. "Doesn't feel like it." The next morning, Darius met with a group of community leaders. They were from East Side, a part of the city where fire trucks often arrived late, if at all. A woman named Ms. Evelyn stood up. She wore a worn church dress and carried a stack of photos. "These are homes that burned while folks waited," she said. "Sometimes 20 minutes. You know why?" She answered before he could. "Because the dispatcher didn't take us serious. Because we ain't Rose Hill." Darius nodded. "We're going to change that." Another man asked, "And how long will that take?" Darius didn't have an answer. Back at City Hall, Janine pulled him aside. "You've got to be more measured when you talk to the public," she warned. "Why?" "Because you don't speak for yourself anymore. You speak for the administration." Darius met her gaze. If the administration can't speak the truth, then maybe it needs a new mouth. She didn't respond, but the tension stayed. That night, Darius visited the hospital. Elena, the girl from the Rose Hill fire, was in physical therapy. When he entered the room, her eyes lit up. "Mr. Darius," she squealed. He knelt beside her wheelchair. "How's my favorite superhero?" She held up her arm covered in healing skin grafts. I'm going to be stronger than you. He grinned. You already are. Back in the hallway, Tyra pulled him aside. Alina's school sent a letter, she said. Said it's too disruptive for her to return with her current needs. They suggested home education, which we can't afford. Darius blinked. That's illegal. I know, she whispered. He squeezed her hand. I'll take care of it. The next day, Darius brought the letter to the mayor. She sighed. We can't interfere in school policy. He stood silent for a moment, then said, if we can write policies to protect rich neighborhoods from late ambulances, we can write them to protect burn victims from being cast aside. She folded her hands. I admire your passion, but we're not miracle workers. Darius leaned forward. No, but we are elected to try. A week later, a motion passed, the Equal Education in Recovery Act. Alina returned to school with city-funded accommodations. It wasn't front-page news, but it was justice. Then came the anonymous tip. A whistleblower within the same security company that blocked Darius from entering Rose Hill sent an encrypted file. Inside, emails, internal memos, even training documents that categorized neighborhoods by risk perception. Neighborhoods with black populations over 40% require gate confirmation. Neighborhoods with average household income above 200K do not question responders. The implication was explosive. It wasn't one bad guard, it was policy. Darius brought it straight to the mayor. She froze. If we move on this, she said, we go to war with the companies, the donors, the people who keep this city running. He stood. Then maybe it's time they stop running the city. The story broke 2 days later. Every outlet picked it up. Darius refused to give a quote. He let the documents speak for themselves. City Hall shook. Protests reignited. And this time they weren't just in front of Rose Hill. They were on the steps of City Hall. Signs that read, no entry, no excuse. He shouldn't have had to prove he belonged. Let him lead. Inside, the mayor summoned Darius. She looked tired, but something in her eyes had changed. This is bigger than a division, she said. We want to create a permanent office of emergency equity, and we want you to run it. Darius paused. No interns this time? She smiled. Full staff, budget, autonomy. He leaned back. I'll take it. Then he added, but I still ride on Saturdays. She laughed. I should have known you'd say that. Part 4. The Gatekeepers Strike Back. The letters came in certified envelopes, 5 in one day, from law firms representing Rose Hill Estates, the Metro Private Security Coalition, and a few donors Darius had never even heard of. The message was clear: back off. They called his department overreach. They called him biased. They demanded a review of all personnel decisions made since his appointment. Then came the ads. Full-page spreads in local newspapers. Is your city being hijacked by activism? We respect first responders, but not politics in emergencies. Firefighters should save people, not push agendas. They never mentioned Darius by name, but his photo was right there, behind the words. Camille Davis called him that night. I just finished reading the Rose Hill lawsuit. They're not trying to win. They're trying to scare you. Darius sighed. It won't work. They want you to blink first. Then I'll keep my eyes wide open. At City Hall, pressure mounted. Council members who once praised him started avoiding eye contact. The mayor's chief of staff asked for a reset meeting. Janine sat across from him in the same room as day one. We're asking you to pause the release of the new responder equity guidelines. Darius raised an eyebrow. Because of the lawsuits? Because of optics. He leaned forward. You don't pause lives being lost. You don't pause kids burning in buildings. Janine's voice softened. We're just trying to keep the city intact. So am I, he said, by not letting fear dictate who we save. That same week, Darius held a press conference, outside the very gate where this all began. When I stood here months ago, I was told to wait. People were trapped inside a burning home, and I was told no entry, not because of danger, not because of policy, because someone looked at my skin and saw threat instead of rescue. And now the same gatekeepers who built that moment are trying to shut another door. But we're not asking anymore. We're walking through, together. The video went viral in less than an hour. Inside Station 74, Reyes watched the speech on his phone. Damn, he whispered. He really said it. Yes. The rookie next to him, Carter, nodded. About time someone did. 3 days later, something broke open. An anonymous leak, a city contractor's memo, revealed that several council members had received donations from the same security firms now suing the city. The emails were worse. One council member wrote, "This Coleman guy is becoming a problem. Maybe he needs to be reminded who signs his checks." The outrage was instant. Protests returned, but not just in front of City Hall. In front of the donors' offices, the mayor called Darius to her office. She closed the door quietly. "You know this is war now, right?" Darius nodded. "It always was. But now it's in the open." He didn't flinch. "That's where I fight best." The city council scheduled an emergency session. Some wanted to vote on suspending Darius's office. They called it temporary restructuring. The public wasn't having it. 1,000 people showed up that night. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, teenagers from Eastside, even members of the Calderon family from the next city over, all chanting one phrase, "No entry, no excuse." Darius sat in the back row of the chamber as council members argued. Finally, they gave him the floor. He stood slowly, looked every one of them in the eye. "You created this office because the public demanded better. You put me here because I told the truth, and now that truth makes you uncomfortable. Good. Change should be uncomfortable. But if you think shutting me down will silence what's already begun out there," he pointed out the window toward the crowd, "you're not listening." The vote came at midnight. 9-2 in favor of keeping his office fully operational. The lawsuits didn't stop, but neither did the momentum. 2 weeks later, Darius launched a pilot program in Eastside, community responder liaisons, real-time dispatch monitoring, cultural competency training for private security firms, open access data portal for 911 response times. The results: response times improved by 22%, complaints dropped by 38%, and for the first time in 5 years, no home in Eastside waited more than 8 minutes for help. Outside the community center, someone spray-painted a mural. It showed Darius in fire gear, carrying a child out of flames. Behind him, a broken gate. In front of him, open doors. Underneath it read, "He didn't ask for permission to save us." Part 5, The Table and the Trap. The invitation arrived on official letterhead from the Federal Council on Emergency Standards. Polished language, dozens of acronyms, and a simple offer: "We invite Director Darius Coleman to join our National Working Group for Equitable Response and Public Trust." It sounded like a victory, until Darius walked into the room. The conference room in D.C. was everything you'd expect. High ceilings, glossy floors, security at the doors. 13 members sat at a long curved table. All but 2 were white. All wore suits, and none of them had ever held a hose, ridden a rig, or waited at a locked gate. The chairwoman, Evelyn Stone, smiled thinly as she welcomed Darius. "We've heard so much about you," she said. "We're glad to have some real-world experience at the table." Darius shook her hand. "It's good to be here." But inside, he already felt the chill. The first session was polite. Too polite. They used words like inclusivity, optics, community bridging, but never once said racism, never once said gate, never once said accountability. When Darius brought up the leaked memo from the Rose Hill security firm, someone shifted in their seat. Another council member cleared his throat. "Well, we want to be cautious about assigning intent, Director Coleman." Darius stared at him. "Intent doesn't stop a house from burning down." Silence. Stone quickly changed the subject. At lunch, one of the younger members, Sophia Cruz from Chicago EMS, leaned over to Darius. "You're not crazy," she whispered. "They really don't want to talk about the why, only the how it looks." Darius nodded. "Then we talk louder." She smiled. "Thought you might say that." Back in Greenville, things kept moving. The Eastside program was picked up by 3 more cities. Darius's training manual for emergency equity standards became the top downloaded resource from the Fire Chiefs Association website. A new podcast titled Beneath the Sirens featured Darius in its premiere episode. But the backlash hadn't gone silent. An anonymous op-ed in a national paper accused him of racializing emergency response. Another pundit said on TV, "When we politicize who gets saved and how, We compromise the very purpose of rescue. Darius didn't respond, not publicly, but in a closed-door council meeting he made it clear. Emergency response is already political. You just didn't notice until someone who looks like me pointed it out. Then came the moment that tested everything. During a committee session, Council Chair Stone proposed a policy revision. In high-value private communities, federal emergency protocol must honor on-site private security procedures unless a confirmed federal override is activated. Darius blinked. "Let me get this straight," he said. "You're suggesting we let private guards decide whether first responders get to enter during a crisis?" Stone responded coolly. "We're trying to respect property rights and chain of command." Darius stood up. "When you let a 17-an-hour security guard decide whether a child burns or breathes, that's not respect. That's institutionalized negligence." A long pause followed. Stone narrowed her eyes. "Careful, Director Coleman. This table works by consensus." Darius replied, "So did the mob that told me to wait outside the gate." That night, Cruz texted him. "They're going to come for you now." He replied, "Let them. I brought a bigger hose." The fallout was fast. Articles painted him as disruptive. Emails leaked. One from Stone, calling him a PR liability. The mayor back home called in concern. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I've been worse." "You're making them nervous." He smiled. "Good." Then something surprising happened. A group of first responders from across the country, Black, Latino, Asian, Indigenous, launched a national coalition. Fire, First in Reform for Equity. They named Darius honorary chair. He hadn't asked, but they insisted. "You gave us the word," said one paramedic from Detroit. "We'll carry the fight." At the next federal meeting, Darius walked in wearing his fire department uniform. Not the suit, not the title, the gear, the history, the truth. He sat down, helmet beside him. Stone looked confused. Darius leaned forward. "If we're going to talk about emergency response, then let's remember what it looks like." Part 6. The Fire We Build. The letter arrived in a manila envelope. No return address. Inside, a note scribbled in black ink. "You've done enough. Now get out while you still can." It wasn't the first, and probably wouldn't be the last. Darius tossed it in the trash, but the threats were getting more creative. Anonymous voicemails. One said, "You're not a firefighter anymore. You're a mouthpiece." Another, "You used to run into burning buildings. Now you just burn bridges." Still another, "We liked you better when you knew your place." But what really rattled him came from the inside. Cruz called late at night. "Darius, she said, they're voting next week." "On what?" "Your removal from the National Council, officially for breach of professional decorum. But we both know what it is." He sighed. "They want the fire without the smoke." Back in Greenville, the community had different plans. Reyes, Camille, and a coalition of activists had been quietly working behind the scenes. When Darius returned home that weekend, they handed him a proposal, hand-printed, covered in sticky notes, passion bleeding from the pages. The Coleman Foundation for Emergency Equity, an independent nonprofit, a training institute, a national watchdog group for fire departments and EMS systems, funded not by donors, but by people. Camille looked at him. "You've lit the match, D. Now build the flame." Darius was quiet for a long time. He stared out the window of the old community center that once hosted his first public forum. The mural outside was faded now, but still powerful. Him, in gear, breaking through the gate. The quote beneath it, "He didn't ask for permission to save us." 3 days later, he stood before the National Council, helmet in hand, no notes, just truth. "When you invited me here, you said you wanted my experience. But what you really wanted was my silence. You wanted to say, look, we've included the firefighter from the viral video, but didn't want to listen to what that firefighter knew. You can have your titles. I'll take the trust of the people." He set his helmet down on the table. "I resign, not from the fight, from the illusion that this table ever wanted change." Then he walked out. That night, the video of his speech hit 15 million views. The hashtag "no entry, no excuse" trended again. But this time, not as outrage, as movement. 2 weeks later, the Coleman Foundation launched. Its first location? An abandoned engine house in Eastside, restored with volunteer labor. Within a month, 12 cities requested equity audits. 9 fire departments invited his team to retrain their dispatch protocols. 3 states offered grants to expand his model. And in Rose Hill, a quiet shift. The HOA president who once filed a complaint against Darius resigned. A new gate was installed, this time with a direct override system for emergency services. And beneath the keypad, a small plaque. In honor of those who didn't wait for permission to save lives. One evening, a fire broke out in a warehouse on the edge of Greenville. Darius was no longer active duty, but he showed up anyway, not in uniform, just in boots, helping people out of smoke. One child clung to him and asked, "Are you a real firefighter?" Darius smiled. "Always will be." Part 7. The Fire Beneath the Surface. It started in Milford, Ohio, a small city, big station, no diversity, 0 black firefighters in over 20 years. Not one. But that wasn't the scandal. The scandal was the memo, leaked by a firefighter named Evan Briggs, white second generation, afraid but fed up. He sent it to the Coleman Foundation with one line, "I can't be silent anymore." The memo detailed informal instructions passed between supervisors. Things like, when responding to calls in Westside, stay in the truck unless absolutely necessary. Don't enter homes unless you're 100% sure it's safe. They sue. Avoid verbal conflict. Let PD handle the louder folks. The implication was clear. They meant black neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods knew it. Darius flew to Milford the next day, met with Briggs in a diner outside town. The young man was shaking. "I didn't know who else would believe me," he said. Darius nodded. "You chose the right fight." The fallout was immediate. Milford Fire denied everything. The mayor called the memo an out-of-context misunderstanding. But then more firefighters stepped forward, anonymously. One message said, "I've seen the chief skip calls if the zip code starts with 431. He says it's a waste of gear." Another, "They keep old equipment in East Milford on purpose. The engine breaks down weekly. We begged for upgrades." Darius held a press conference on the steps of Milford City Hall. This isn't about one memo. This is about a culture that decides who gets rescued based on skin tone and income level. That's not emergency response. That's discrimination in uniform. Behind him stood members of the Coleman Foundation, and for the first time, Evan Briggs without a mask or pseudonym. Reporters swarmed. His courage went viral, but so did the backlash. By the next morning, the fire chief had placed Briggs on administrative leave. No retaliation, they claimed, just pending review. Darius called it what it was, punishment for telling the truth. That night, Darius received a voicemail from a former ally, a city councilwoman from Greenville, once one of his strongest supporters. Now she sounded cold. "Darius, I'm hearing from donors. They're nervous. You're stirring up too much. This isn't what we meant when we said reform. You're going too far." He stared at the phone. Too far? Was saving people too far? More cities reached out. Pittsburgh, Phoenix, Mobile, Alabama. Departments wanted the Coleman Foundation's help reviewing response equity, but others began pulling away. One fire chief canceled a scheduled workshop. One state fire marshal warned him not to turn the profession into a courtroom. Then came the lawsuit, filed in federal court by a group calling themselves Protect the Shield. They accused Darius and his foundation of defamation, interference with municipal operations, inciting distrust in first responders. They were asking for $20 million in damages. The case was backed by major law firms, funded by old money donors from cities Darius had investigated. The message, loud and clear, back off or be buried. Camille Davis returned as legal counsel for the foundation. She slammed the file on his desk. "They're not suing to win," she said. "They're suing to bleed you dry. Time, money, and reputation." Darius asked quietly, "Can we fight it?" She looked him in the eye. "Oh, we're going to do more than fight. We're going to make them regret ever putting your name on that paper." Meanwhile, the people rallied. Protests reignited in Milford. College students created a campaign, Fire for All. TikTok videos showed firefighters of color reading hate mail aloud, then tossing it into fire pits. Fundraising for the foundation skyrocketed, over $4.2 million in a week. And then, the biggest blow. A confidential email was leaked to a journalist in Chicago. From a high-ranking federal official, it referred to Darius as an unpredictable element with activist tendencies. If he continues unchecked, we risk national morale issues and public safety. The article hit every major outlet. It was meant to shame him, but it only fueled the fire. Darius gave a speech on livestream that night, standing in front of the very first engine he ever rode. Helmet beside him, no podium, no filters. You can call me dangerous, you can call me political, but if the act of fighting for equal rescue, for the same speed, the same effort, the same care, makes me a threat, then I promise you this, I will never be safe for injustice again. Part 8. Cross-examined. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, in tone. Marble walls, polished pews, a federal judge with a reputation for order above noise. Darius sat at the plaintiff's table with Camille beside him. Across the aisle, 3 lawyers in $1,000 suits, backed by the shield-shaped banner of their so-called advocacy group, Protect the Shield. He knew their names now. And more importantly, he knew their donors. The trial was meant to be fast, intended to overwhelm him, to drain him, to silence him. But Darius didn't come to whisper. On day 1, the opposing counsel opened strong. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we have here is not a man of service, but a man of spectacle, a firefighter turned celebrity, who has used emotional manipulation and media platforms to tarnish decades of honorable service across this country. They called the Coleman Foundation a political operation disguised as reform. They called his audits witch hunts. They called him divisive. Day 3. Darius took the stand. Camille looked him in the eye before he walked up. You've done this before, she said, just not with cameras. He nodded. Let's light it up. The defense wasted no time. Mr. Coleman, are you a certified investigator? No. Are you a federal authority? No. Then by what right did you accuse entire fire departments of racial bias? Darius didn't blink. By the right of the data they tried to hide. The lawyer smirked. Oh, so you're a data scientist now? Darius leaned forward slightly. No, I'm a man who's seen too many houses burn in the wrong zip codes. They pulled up one of his old live streams. The clip where he said, emergency systems were built on lines. Color lines, class lines, invisible fences. The lawyer turned to the jury. Would a responsible leader say something like this? Darius answered before anyone else could. A responsible leader wouldn't wait for a child to die before admitting that line exists. During recess, the opposing counsel approached Camille in the hallway. He smiled. That man's good with a mic, he said. But juries get tired of fire after a while. Camille leaned in, whispering low. Then maybe you've forgotten how fast fire spreads. That night, Darius received an email. No subject line, just a few words. Drop the case. You'll keep your foundation. You'll keep your seat. Just stop the crusade. No signature. But the meaning was crystal clear. They were offering peace at the cost of justice. He didn't respond. Instead, he wrote a speech. Not for the court, for the people. On day 6, Darius was called back to the stand for redirect. Camille stood slowly, calm but firm. Mr. Coleman, what do you say to those who claim you've caused division? He breathed in, then spoke, low and strong. The house was already burning. I didn't cause the fire. I just refused to walk away while others were still inside. She continued. What do you say to those who say you're not qualified to lead this movement? He smiled. I say I've carried a child out of a burning home. I've been told I don't belong, even in uniform. I've seen fear in the eyes of people who thought I came to arrest them, when I came to save them. If that doesn't qualify me, nothing ever will. Camille's final question silenced the room. Mr. Coleman, what do you hope this jury remembers? He looked straight at them. No anger, just clarity. That silence is safe, but justice isn't. And if they punish people for telling the truth, they'll never hear it again when it matters most. The courtroom didn't clap, but outside, hundreds waited, watching live streams, holding signs, some old, some new, One read, "You can't sue the truth into silence." Part 9, The Verdict and the Vision. The courtroom was packed on the day of the verdict. Journalists, activists, firefighters in uniform, and civilians from across the country. Some who had never met Darius Coleman, but saw themselves in his fire. The judge entered. The jury returned. 12 people. Faces unreadable. The clerk read aloud. In the matter of Protect the Shield versus the Coleman Foundation and Darius Coleman, we find the defendants not liable for defamation or interference. We find the evidence presented demonstrates a pattern of credible concern regarding inequitable emergency response. We recognize the First Amendment protection of watchdog organizations acting in the public interest. Judgment in favor of the defense. Gasps, then applause, then tears. Camille squeezed Darius's shoulder. He just closed his eyes. Outside, a reporter thrust a mic forward. "Darius, what's your reaction?" He looked at the sea of faces, all waiting. This wasn't just about me. It never was. It was about every person who's ever waited too long for help. Every neighborhood passed over. Every voice ignored. The court heard us. Now it's time the country does too. That evening, back at the foundation office, Darius walked past the wall of photos, victories, murals, kids saved. He stopped at a new one, a map of the U.S. with red pins marking cities requesting reform audits. There were 38 pins, and counting. The board met that weekend. Camille Reyes-Cruz, now a full-time director of operations, and 2 new additions, a fire chief from Atlanta and a trauma nurse from Kansas City. They had one question for Darius. Where do we go from here? He looked at the map, then back at them. We go everywhere. The Coleman Foundation launched a new initiative, Red Line to Lifeline, a nationwide data portal tracking 911 response times by zip code, emergency service investments by demographic, lawsuits involving gate delays or biased protocols. It wasn't just reform, it was infrastructure and accountability. That same month, Darius received a call. It wasn't political, it wasn't national, it was local. Greenville Fire Station 74. Captain Mike Simmons had retired. They were naming his replacement, and they asked if Darius wanted to come home. Not as director, not as a symbol, but as Captain Coleman. He visited the station that night, walked the bays, touched the old rig. Reyes stood beside him, arms crossed. You really thinking about it? Darius exhaled. I miss the smoke, not the fire, but the work. Reyes nodded. You don't have to choose, you know. You can do both. 1 week later, Darius stood at a podium in his turnout gear. The badge on his chest read, C. Petit D. Coleman. Behind him, his old team. Before him, a new class of recruits, the most diverse in the city's history. He spoke simply. The job doesn't care where you're from. It only cares whether you'll run in when others run out. But I care. I care that every one of you knows this uniform doesn't erase who you are. It adds to it. After the ceremony, a little boy ran up to him, 8 years old, missing front teeth, holding a plastic fire truck. Are you the guy from the video? He asked. Darius smiled. Which one? The one where you didn't wait. He knelt. Yeah, he said. That was me. The boy's eyes were wide. I want to be like that. Darius grinned. You already are. Part 10. Back through the gate. It was 2:03 a.m. The call came in fast, screaming in the dispatcher's voice. Structure fire, Rose Hill Estates, multiple units, reported occupants inside, level 4 alarm, all available companies respond. Darius was halfway into his gear before the rest of Station 74 had even stood up. Reyes threw him his helmet. Still know the way? Darius clipped the chin strap. Better than GPS. The fire was visible before they even reached the gate. A column of smoke cut into the sky, orange against black, flames dancing above the rooftops of wealth and silence. And in front of it all, the gate, the same one. But something had changed. This time, it opened before they stopped. Fully, no hesitation, no delay, just entry. They poured in, 4 trucks, 2 ladders, and Captain Darius Coleman charging ahead like a storm with a heartbeat. The house was huge. 3 stories, 2 wings, 5 people trapped, according to the neighbor who made the call. Darius broke the front door with a hydraulic ram. Smoke hit him like memory, but he didn't flinch. He moved fast, room to room, shouting, searching, and then the voice, a child's scream. Upstairs. He took the stairs 3 at a time, flames licking the hallway. He kicked open the last door on the left. Inside, a boy, maybe 6, frozen, clutching a stuffed animal, eyes wide. Darius reached out. "I've got you." When he emerged from the front of the burning house, child in arms, crowd forming behind barricades, it looked like déjà vu. But this time, the cameras weren't the only ones watching. It was the same security guard from that day years ago. Older now, standing outside the perimeter line. Eyes glassy. Darius didn't say a word, just nodded once. The guard nodded back and lowered his eyes. In the days that followed, no one asked why Darius was there. No one questioned why a national reform leader was back on the front line. They just told the story, how he went in, how he came out, how he didn't wait. Later that week, the city held a ceremony at Rose Hill. Not a protest, not a hearing, a dedication. They unveiled a new bronze plaque next to the once infamous gate. It read, "In honor of those who never needed permission to do the right thing," dedicated to Captain Darius Coleman and every first responder who refused to wait. The Coleman Foundation grew. More cities joined. More voices were heard. New leadership rose. And Darius, he stayed right where he belonged. Halfway between smoke and structure, power and people, front line and fire line. He once told a jury, if they punish people for telling the truth, they'll never hear it again when it matters most. Now, the truth didn't need shouting anymore. It walked freely, through every gate. One day, years later, a young recruit asked him, "What made you keep going, even when they tried to shut you down?" Darius paused, then smiled. "Because one day someone's going to run toward a fire, and they'll never have to wonder if the gate will open. And when that day comes, we'll know we finally got it right."